This video is going to talk about markups based on selling price. Markups based on selling price are reported as a percent of sales. Each question that you're going to see will have selling price as the base instead of cost as the base. And we have to understand that if we're going on selling price, it's always considered 100%. It's going to be your cost plus your markup equals your selling price. So the four pieces of information, similar to when we based markups cost on cost, this is going to have cost, selling price, some form of markup percent, and dollar markup. But when we use selling price, it's always the base, and that's what we have to remember. Our PBR circles will look like what you see here, where we have cost as the portion or dollar markup as the portion, and depending on what you're trying to find, if you're finding cost, you're going to find use the complement of the markup percent, and if you're finding dollar markup, you're going to actually use that markup percent. But base each time is selling price. So for the first few questions, we're going to use this one where selling price is finding dollar markup by using the percent markup. So an example would be MC Sports pays its manufacturer $160 for a pair of skis. The dollar markup is going to be $40. What is the percent markup based on selling price? In order to do this, we're going to make our PBR circle, and remember we were using dollar markup on the top, percent markup for the rate, and selling price as the base. Now it tells us our dollar markup is going to be $40, so we can plug that in. It doesn't tell us our selling price, it tells us our cost, but remember, cost and selling price together, or cost and markup, are selling price, so 160 plus 40 is 200. And if we divide that out, we'll get our markup percent. So 40 divided by 200, and you get 0.2 or 20%. So it was a 20% markup based on selling price. In a similar example, we have Meyer purchasing headphones for $16 a piece. They'll be adding a dollar markup of $3.50. What is the markup percent based on selling price? So again, we're going to find out markup percent. So we know our dollar markup is $3.50. Our overall price, or our selling price, is the 16 plus the 350, or 19.50. If we divide that out, 350 divided by 19.50, we get 0.179487, blah blah blah. We don't need all of that. We just need a percentage. Now normally a rounded off percent to the ones place would be fine, but in this case, let's go to the hundredths percent. So we'll move our decimal point over 2 to get percentages, and we'll end up with 17 point and then 94 and then 8. That 8 will make the 4 go to a 5, so 95%. Alright, now as I said earlier, if we're finding selling price, we have to understand that selling price is the cost plus the dollar markup. Now in this case, what we have is the cost is going to be our portion, and we're going to use that in these problems where it will give us a markup percent, but we're going to use the complement, or 100% minus the markup percent, to find our selling price. So the cost of a pair of running shoes at Foot Locker is $74. Foot Locker decides it needs a 40% markup based on selling price. What is the amount of markup in dollars? What is the selling price? Well, what we're going to do is build our PBR circle, and we know cost, so we're going to plug that in and use that as our portion. We're trying to find selling price, or our base, and we know it was a 40% markup. Well, the $74 doesn't represent the 40% of the selling price, it represents the other 60% of the selling price, so that's what we're going to plug in there. And if we do 74 divided by 0.6, we end up with 123.333 repeating. Well, we'll round that off to $123.33. And so that would be the selling price. But it also asks us for what is the amount of markup. So we have to do a little subtraction here. 123.33 minus 74, and we get 33 cents. We'll have to borrow here, so this becomes 12, 11, 13 minus 4 is 9, 11 minus 7 is 4, so we have $49.33 as our markup. Okay, and another example says LCD TVs have a cost of $950. If Best Buy applies a 60% markup based on selling price, what is the selling price and what is the dollar markup? Well, let's find the selling price first. We know the cost is $950, so that goes as our portion. Best Buy applies a 60% markup based on selling price, which means the $950 is actually only 40% of the selling price. So if we do $950 divided by 0.4, we end up with $2,375. Now we still need to find the dollar markup, so we'll take that $23.75 and subtract the cost $950, and we get a dollar markup of $1,425. So again, selling price was $23.75, dollar markup was $14.25. Alright, we're going to end up finding selling price in the next couple problems based on cost and percent markup. We have two options here. We can either use the PBR circle on the left, which uses cost 100% minus the percent markup and selling price, or we can use the dollar markup, percent markup, and selling price. So in the first example, a computer sells at a local store for $820. You know the owner marked the item up by 30% based on selling price. What is the cost to the owner? So we are making a PBR circle, and we're going to be finding cost, which is going to be this top one. So if we know our selling price, which in this case is $820, and we know our percent markup, now we have to think here, this is the 30% is the markup. So what is the cost? Well, that's the 70%, the other 70% to make 100%, or the selling price. So if we multiply this, 820 times 0.7, we end up with $574, which is the cost of the computer to the store. Now the other way to do this is if we made our PBR circle find markup. Well, we know selling price, $820. We know that it's a 30% markup, so if we did 0.3, the dollar amount we get isn't the cost, it's the dollar markup. So if we did that, we end up with $246, but that's the markup, so we have to do some subtraction after that with 820 minus 246, and we get $574 that way. Oops, 74. Either way works, so it's up to you on which one you decide to use. Alright, now in the last one, we have a coffee maker sells for $88, 36% markup was applied based on selling price. What was the cost of the coffee maker? So again, I'll be using both methods here, but you'll make the decision on which one you want to use. If I know that the selling price is $88, I'm going to fill that in. There's a 36% markup on selling price, which means the complement to that is 64%, which is the cost. So if I do 88 times 0.64, I end up with $56.32, which would be my cost, or the cost to the cost of the coffee maker to the store. Now the other way to do this would be to find dollar markup. So again, $88 is our selling price, but we use the actual percentage listed in the problem because we'd find the markup and then subtract from our selling price. So that would give us $31.68 if we do that multiplication. But that's our markup. So then we want to say, well, let's do 88 minus 31.68, and when we subtract that, we get 56.32, which is the same price we got using the first method. So it'll be your decision on which one you decide to use, but they both work when we're finding cost.